So these fantastic cells had developed, but there were lots of life around, so there was competition for them. And then happened something that one can say it was fortunate, at least it was fortunate for us, it turned out to be, but it was a catastrophe, one of the biggest catastrophes in Earth's history. Earth was in a position in the solar system, it vibrates a little bit back and forth in its orbit, and it's a tiny amount, but when it comes out at, one can say, a little larger distance from the sun, then we get ice ages. And so we were at the time where a new ice age was about to come. And it then happens this, at the same time, all the continents, all the land masses on the Earth, they had floated down to near equator. The land masses, the continents are floating around always. They are also floating for the moment. They move approximately with the speed the same as the nail growth with. So it's a very small speed, but over billions of years, it's a lot. So they float around on top of the Earth, and sometimes they collide with one another, and then we get mountain chains, and so sometimes they divert from one another. At this time here, they had all gathered together just around the equator, and land reflects quite a bit more sunlight than ocean do. So one has the intuitive feeling that it's opposite, but that's because water scatters light. So when we stand on the coast, the water always looks brighter than the land masses. But if you stand outside and look down on the Earth, so the water is darker and the land masses are brighter. The land masses reflect more light when you stand outside and look down on the Earth. So now all the land was lying at the equator where most of the sunlight is. That means much more sunlight than usual was reflected back into space. At the same time, we were approaching an ice age. And this was a bad combination. So the ice age became very strong. The polar caps, both the North Pole and the South Pole ice, spread further down on the globe than it would otherwise have done. So more sunlight was reflected, meaning that it became colder. So the polar caps spread even further. So it got colder and they spread further, and it got colder and they spread further. It was an unfortunate situation we were locked into. In the end, the whole Earth was covered with ice. So there has been kilometers thick layers of ice covering the whole globe, and has been bright white, reflecting most of the sunlight that hit the Earth. So it became approximately minus 50 degrees cold on the Earth. And the air was very dry because all of the water has frozen in, which contributes further to them, making it cold. So that means that most of life on Earth died out. It couldn't manage such big changes, down to minus 50 degrees on average on the Earth. So almost all life died out except a few organisms that could adapt to the very cold conditions. And then within the next few million years, the pressure from volcanoes underneath the ice built up so strongly that in the end, huge eruptions of volcanoes broke through the ice. And volcanoes spray out lots of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. And since there was no water in the atmosphere, there was nothing to rain out the carbon dioxide, as is usually the case. So the whole cycle was broken. The CO2 content was raising to thousands of times of what it is today. And the temperature was increasing to approximately plus 50 degrees. And you can imagine in Earth where it's only organisms that can manage minus 50 degrees that have survived. Suddenly it becomes plus 50 degrees. So the rest of it dies out. So we can see in sediments on the Earth, there was almost no life left on Earth. But it didn't 100% die out. So once the volcanoes has erupted and we come back to normal, the ice melt. It's again an accelerating process because the ice started melting. So we expose the oceans that are darker. Therefore it absorbs more light. Therefore it gets warmer. Therefore more ice melt. Therefore there's more ocean again that is darker than the ice. And so it gets warmer. And so it accelerates and the ice draws back to the polar regions again, and we get what we know from today. So during the next 10 million years, all kind of life that we know today, all the basic structures of animals and plants was built up during this very short period where the Earth was open, all the niches was open for new life forms. So they formed, and all the life we know today is actually from that period, built on eukaryotic cells, the big cells with a core inside. So in many respects, when one talks about when did life originated on Earth, life formally, we can say it originated 3.5–4 billion years ago in the very early time of the Earth's evolution. But life, as we intuitively connect with life, it originated only 500 million years ago. It's the one that is born at a certain time, live its life and die. And that's very different from the early organisms. They didn't have this cyclus. So we connect life with something that is born and later on die. This originated 500 million years ago only.